Hi there, it's Curtis Stage, Los Angeles Mission College. Today's lecture is on Gestalt principles of design. So Gestalt is coming from German theory. This was part of psychology, designers and artists kind of started using some of the ideas from Gestalt theory that was in psychology, and they brought it into art and design because there's a lot of great things in there that can kind of help us create good art and design. So some of the principles we're going to talk about today. So these are principles again. This is kind of like the principles and elements of design, but this takes it another step further. We're going to talk about 6 of them. So Gestalt principles are an important set of ideas because we can implement them and really improve our aesthetics of a design. But also we can use the functionality and user friendliness for Gestalt. So the 6 individual principles are similarity, continuation, closure, proximity, figure, ground, and then symmetry and order. Now, symmetry is part of our principles and elements of design, and figure ground kind of is as well. You're going to see how they look a little differently when we talk about them in Gestalt theory. And mostly, we're going to look at a lot of logo design within this as well. So, similarity. Let's start with that one. So the squares in this one are all evenly, obviously, dispersed all over, and they're the same size, but kind of human idea here is to group those things together. So naturally what we want to do is group all the green ones together, group all the gray ones together, right? We want to pick similar objects and visually group them regardless of their proximity to each other. So none of these things are close to each other. I mean, they all are equally spaced, but the green ones, in our minds, we're all putting those together. Those are all green. And the gray ones, in our mind, we're putting those all together. So this is a really important thing that Gestalt lets us do, is use this idea of similarity. It's not about repetition. It's not about pattern necessarily. It's about looking inside pattern and finding the similarities of objects within there. Sometimes, again, there's no rhyme or reason to this. So where pattern, when we're talking about that in the principles and elements of design, there's rhyme and reason to the pattern. In similarities, our brain tries to find the rhyme and reason out of possible chaos. So in this logo for NBC, we see a similarity here. So again, it's trying to find the similarity of objects and their relationship to each other. So in this case, we've got a peacock here for NBC. Many of you probably knew this was a peacock. Some of you might not have known. And it's pretty abstract. I mean, the only way we know this is a peacock, actually, is because it's got that little tiny beak up there. That's the only way we know it. But this uses similarity of shapes. So we've got these abstract shapes that look somewhat like peacock feathers. And they're also similar to each other, and they're grouped together in such a way. So if those shapes were lined up in a straight line, we would not think of them as feathers at all, right? If they were just lined up, right, those shapes, if they were just lined up in a straight line, if they weren't grouped kind of like that shape that we see there, if they weren't grouped like that, we wouldn't see them at all as feathers or as a group of feathers. We would only see them as these, abstract teardroppy shapes. But since similarity, right, we take these objects and we group them together in such a way, we're almost kind of using unity, like we talked about as a principle of design. Similarity has some relationships to unity. So on this one, though, one of the things we can do with similarity is kind of point out difference. And that's kind of exciting. So we can use similarity, in other words, to say, hey, all of these are the same, but which ones, it's almost kind of like a Sesame Street thing, like, look at all the things that are the same, find out which one's different. That's what's kind of happening within this Beatles album cover, is we got the Beatles here, and they all are facing forward except one. So that is kind of taking similar and saying, let's emphasize something by finding its dissimilar object. So this dissimilar object is called an anomaly. When you've got a whole group of objects, same thing on the right with all those little people, and then we've got the little orange one off by itself, that one dissimilar object is called an anomaly. So we've got an anomaly that kind of breaks the mold. It's the thing that's different from everything else. That thing that's different from everything else is standing out. anomaly. And that word is being put in one of these places right here, anomaly. I've got the definition for you right there. All right, so the next one we want to talk about is continuation. This one we see a lot in logo design, and of course Coca-Cola, one of the famous logos, and we'll talk about this in our logo design lecture. We've got the flag, so that where that C up at the bottom is underlying Coca there, and where the C up at the top, the shape that's coming out of it, those are called flags, and they're underlining and overlining, I guess. And that's also is cursive, right? So the cursive writing is obviously continuation. And then we've got NASA, where the A and the S are connected to each other, forming a continuous object. The law of continuity states that elements that are similarly aligned will be perceived as a whole when your eye begins to follow them in one direction, right? Unless something else breaks that continuity. So in this case with Coca-Cola, there is a break in the continuity, and with the NASA, the N is not connected and the A is not connected at the end. But there is a continuous nature between those. Here we've got MasterCard, where the two circles are kind of connected to each other, right? They're continually flowing from one object to another, and there's no break in that object. So our eye, there's no gap, in other words. There's this overlap that happens, and our eye continues through those two circles without any gap. Pretty cool. Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about is closure. This exists out of assumption and understanding. Like we, as human beings, can see an object and our eyes can close it. So if we take the panda bear on the right, for the World Wildlife Fund, there's the holes up on the top where the head is, right, where the white continues in the, basically outside the panda and its back, right? It doesn't close that shape. Think of closure as having open parts to it. So we've got this, or closed parts to it that make other objects. So our eye finishes the object, right? So with the one on the right, our eye is finishing that object. With the logo on the left, FedEx, our eye is also finishing this object. We see the little arrow between the E and the X. How many people have ever seen that? Some of you may have never seen that there was a little arrow pointing, right? Hey, we're FedEx. We're delivering packages to you rapidly, right? So that arrow that is shaped that's in there is using the idea of closure to create that space. Our eye is drawn to that space and creates another object based out of the negative space. This is something that closure can really do. The next one is proximity. Again, this is similar to unity. So proximity is grouping. When individual elements are very close to each other, the human brain kind of perceives them as a whole, and they make a different shape. For example, this logo of the car shape is made up of many different individual elements, and they all represent the versatility of the food offered by the food mobile. I guess, I don't know, food mobile. This is a made-up company, or maybe it's not. However, because they are grouped together so closely, right, our brain perceives them as a holistic shape. So proximity, again, kind of like unity that we saw in the principles and elements of design, works this way, where these other shapes create a shape that makes a whole. And then I like this little animation there. Here's another example of proximity, two on the right and the left. So with the flames, again, if those individual flames on the right aren't next to each other, they don't have a proximate space to each other, we're not reading that as flame. And then the deer, of course, with that line work, the proximity of those lines is helping us kind of put together that is a deer. So we wouldn't see those otherwise. Here's proximity, but it's also figure and ground, right? And in fact, all of these are figure and ground, right? The outside and the inside are affecting each other. So if I go back to this one, the outside space, the white space inside that car is affecting just as much as the inside space, all the shapes. And the same thing with there's my animation. Same thing with this, and the same thing with these. So that smile is created because of figure ground that we would see in the principles and elements of design. So figure ground, this specifically, what happens here is we're seeing shapes inside other shapes. Love this. Designers and artists can use this to their advantage to make things pretty exciting. So we've got, the fork. How do we make a fork exciting, and how do we say food and wine at the same time, right? Having those, kind of individual fork parts become wine bottles, really great. Notice the high contrast to both of these, right? The one on the right, we got the animals in there, make the positive, negative space of the tree shape, creates the animal shapes. And even if we didn't have the eyes and the ears and the mouths of those animals, we would still see those animal shapes in there, most likely. This one's pretty great too, as poster for Peter and the Wolf. I mean, if you're tasked to make this poster, how do you create the wolf and Peter at the same time without showing Peter, right? It's like, oh, I got to show the kid and the wolf at the same time. This is a great way to do that. So using Gestalt principles for design can really help out. Now, what principles and elements of design do we see in here? So I see texture, right? I see scale clearly in there, really good. Line, color, so lots of asymmetric balance. There's more up on the upper left side than the bottom right side. So we've got a lot going on in here in terms of principles and elements of design, but figure ground. This one's symmetry, order, and we talked about this a little bit in the Principles and Elements of Design lecture. So when we're talking about symmetry and order, designers can really use this. Order may be brought about by symmetry or even through an organized asymmetrical manner. And in a nutshell, the goal is to create a sense of order so your viewers are not lost in creating a relationship. This is where symmetry really comes into play. And we also get this feeling of harmony, and the one on the right could also be similarity as well, right? Because we're seeing another shape. So we're seeing an owl clearly, or some sort of bird, or animal shape. So similarity, if we're talking about that one again, remember these shapes will create another object. So that one has two things going on. It has symmetry and it also has similarity. So pretty good. The one on the left, I guess you could say, hey, those are pizza slices or something, kind of moving. I don't know. And it could be a star in the middle. So this could be something else. It could turn into something if it was a motion graphic or something like that. So again, using Gestalt principles can really help us with our design. It can really help us kind of make our designs more exciting. I really want you to think about how Gestalt principles work, using those 6 principles and how we can infiltrate them in our art and design. All right, so once again, this is Curtis Stage from Multimedia 100. We'll see you next time.